My parents gave my perfect, reliable car to my golden child brother and left me with a 15-year-old rust bucket for my hour-long commute to my new job. When it left me stranded on the side of a 6-lane highway, I thought my life was over. But in the glove box, I found a document they had long forgotten about, and I set a trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The sound was less of a bang and more of a sickening metallic cough, followed by a shudder that vibrated through the steering wheel and up into my bones. The car, a machine I had affectionately nicknamed Old Betsy in a fit of ironic despair, gave one final, wheezing gasp before coasting into a dead, silent glide. The power steering died with the engine, and it took all my strength to wrestle the car from the middle lane of the interstate over to the gravel-strewn shoulder. Cars and semi-trucks blared their horns as they whipped past, their speed rattling the frame of my ancient vehicle. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of sheer panic. I was stranded, not just stranded, but stranded on the I-405, an hour away from home and 30 minutes from the most important client meeting of my fledgling career. I was a junior graphic designer at a prestigious agency, a job I had clawed my way into after years of study and unpaid internships. This meeting was my chance to lead a pitch, to prove I was more than just the girl who fetched coffee and aligned pixels. Now, my future felt as dead as the engine of the car. Tears of frustration pricked at my eyes. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. This wasn't just bad luck, it was a consequence. A direct result of a family decision that had left me feeling like a second-class citizen in my own home. Just 2 weeks ago, I had been the proud driver of a 5-year-old, perfectly maintained sedan. It was reliable, safe, and entirely suitable for the long commute my new job demanded. But that was before my younger brother, Leo, had declared his part-time campus job too important to rely on the bus. My parents, Mark and Susan, had held a family meeting where they announced the verdict without any room for discussion. Leo would get the sedan. I would get Old Betsy, the family's backup car that had spent most of the last decade collecting dust and rust in the garage. "You're more responsible, Clara," my mother had said, patting my arm with a placating smile. "You can handle it, it's just temporary." My father had added, "It's a good car, just needs to be driven a bit to get the kinks out." The kinks now had me trapped on the edge of a concrete river of speeding metal, with the smell of burnt oil filling my nostrils. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. My boss, Mr. Henderson, was a stickler for punctuality. A no-show was professional poison. I called the office, my voice trembling as I explained my situation to the receptionist, who promised to pass along the message with a tone that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book. Next, I called my dad. He answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful. "Hey, honey, how's the new job?" "Dad, the car broke down," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm on the side of the highway, I don't know what to do." There was a pause. I could hear the television in the background. "Broke down? Are you sure you didn't just run out of gas?" The question felt like a small, sharp slap. "No, I'm not out of gas. The engine just died. It made a horrible noise." He sighed, a heavy, put-upon sound that instantly made me feel like an inconvenience. All right, don't panic. Let me see, I think we have roadside assistance on the insurance. Check the glove box for the policy card." The glove box was a cluttered mess of old napkins, ketchup packets, and a tangle of charging cords for phones that hadn't existed in years. I shoved it all aside, my fingers searching for the familiar plastic sleeve that held the insurance and registration. My heart sank. What if it wasn't here? What if Dad forgot to put it back? My desperation grew with every passing second. Finally, my fingers brushed against a thick manila envelope tucked deep in the back, behind the owner's manual. I pulled it out, relief washing over me. Inside was the insurance card, but there was another document with it, a heavy piece of cardstock folded in 3. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the official letterhead. It was the vehicle title. I scanned the details, make, model, VIN, all matching the sad excuse for a car I was currently trapped in. But it was the bottom of the document that made me stop breathing. In the section labeled Transfer of Title by Seller, all the lines were fill. Let out, my father's name, Mark, was listed as the seller. His signature, messy but unmistakable, was scrawled on the designated line, and in the box for the buyer, the new legal owner was my name, Clara. The transfer date was over a year ago. I stared at the document, the world outside my windows fading into a blur. He had signed it over to me. Not last week, not when he'd forced this car upon me, but a full year ago. He had probably done it for some dry insurance reason, to lower a premium or simplify the policy, and then had completely forgotten about it. He had forgotten that the piece of junk he'd saddled me with, the car that was now ruining my career, wasn't his to give. It was mine. Legally, completely, and indisputably mine. A slow, cold anger began to replace the panic in my chest. They had given away my reliable car and forced me into a vehicle they considered a disposable burden. But they had made a critical mistake. They had handed me the one thing that could change everything. The betrayal of their favoritism was sharp and painful, but the discovery of this forgotten document felt like something else entirely. It felt like power. The tow truck arrived 45 minutes later, an eternity spent watching traffic whiz by and rereading the title in my hands until the words blurred. The driver, a kind man with a weathered face named Gus, helped me into the cab of his truck while he expertly hooked up old Betsy. As we pulled away, leaving my former prison behind, I finally called my mother. "Mom, the tow truck is here. I'm on my way home." Her voice was a mixture of relief and mild annoyance. "Oh, thank goodness. You had us worried sick. Your father was just about to look up the number for the state patrol." Worried sick, I glanced at my phone. Neither of them had called back once to check on me. "The car is being towed back to the house," I explained, my voice flat. "I missed my meeting. My boss is furious." "Now, Clara, don't be dramatic," she said, her tone shifting into the familiar, placating cadence she used whenever I expressed a negative emotion. "I'm sure he'll understand. These things happen." "Do they?" I countered, the cold anger still simmering beneath the surface. "Because they never seemed to happen with the sedan, the car you gave to Leo." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "That is not fair, and you know it. We did what we thought was best for everyone. Leo needs a reliable car for his responsibilities." His responsibilities consisted of driving 10 minutes to campus for his part-time library job and meeting friends for pizza. My responsibilities included a 60-mile round-trip commute that paid for my own student loans and contributed to the household grocery bill. The logic was so twisted, so blatantly unfair, that it left me speechless. "I have to go, Mom. I'll see you at home." I hung up before she could offer another empty platitude. When Gus dropped the car in the driveway, it looked even more pathetic than usual. One of the hubcaps had fallen off during the tow, and a thin trail of brownish liquid trickled from beneath the engine block. My father came out of the house, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He surveyed the scene with a frown, not looking at me but at the car, as if it had personally offended him. "Well, that's not good," he grumbled. "Probably the water pump. I knew I should have replaced it last year." He had known. He had known the car had a serious, predictable issue and still deemed it acceptable for his daughter to drive on one of the busiest highways in the country. He hadn't forgotten about the water pump. He had simply ignored it. His negligence was another layer of the betrayal. "I could have been seriously hurt, Dad." My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of my fear and anger. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "But you weren't, Clara. That's the important thing. It's just a car. We'll get it fixed." Just a car. My career, my safety, my sanity, all secondary to the inconvenience of a repair bill. Leo's sedan was parked pristinely on the other side of the driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun. It felt like a monument to their priorities. I watched as my father popped the hood, peering into the smoky engine with the air of a man dealing with a minor annoyance. He was already treating it as his problem to solve, his car to manage. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who held the real authority here. That evening, I stayed in my room, the signed title resting on my nightstand like a sacred text. I could hear my family downstairs. The television was on, and I could faintly make out the sounds of their laughter during a commercial break. They had already moved on. My terrifying ordeal on the highway, the potential implosion of my career, had been reduced to a dinner table anecdote, a minor hiccup in their otherwise peaceful day. They were so comfortable in their roles, my parents as the benevolent dictators, Leo as the favored prince, and me as the resilient, ever-understanding daughter. I smoothed out the crease in the title document. My father's signature seemed to mock me. He had signed away his power over this hunk of metal a year ago and never gave it a second thought. He saw the car as an extension of himself, another asset to be moved around the family chessboard as he saw fit. He and my mother had made a decision based on their deeply ingrained belief system. Leo's wants outweighed my needs. They assumed I would absorb the inconvenience, that I would, as always, handle it. But lying there on the highway, with the roar of traffic in my ears, something inside me had shifted. The foundation of my role in the family had cracked. I was no longer the daughter who would silently accept the scraps. They had pushed me too far, underestimated my breaking point. As I drifted off to sleep, a plan began to form in my mind, a quiet rebellion sparked by a forgotten signature. They had treated me like a temporary problem, but they were about to discover I was a permanent one. And they had no idea that the solution was already in my hands. The roots of my parents' favoritism toward Leo ran deep, tangled in years of unspoken assumptions and celebrated milestones. He was the boy, the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong. His every minor achievement was met with fanfare. When he got an A on a history paper, my mother would bake a cake. When he scored a single goal in a recreational soccer game, my father would recount the story to anyone who would listen. He was charming and easygoing, largely because he'd never had to struggle for anything in his life. The path before him was always magically cleared. My path, on the other hand, I had to pave myself. I was the responsible one, the serious one. While Leo spent his high school summers at camps, I worked as a cashier at the local grocery store, saving for college. My parents had praised my work ethic, but they never offered to match my savings or ease my burden. It was simply expected. "Clara's so mature for her age," they'd tell their friends, as if my maturity were a natural trait and not a necessity born from their benign neglect. I paid for my own art supplies in college, worked 2 part-time jobs, and graduated with honors, a feat they acknowledged with a polite dinner and a card. 3 months later, they bought Leo his first car as a surprise for his 19th birthday. The injustice of the car swap 2 weeks ago was just the latest and most glaring example of this lifelong dynamic. The family meeting had felt more like a sentencing. I had just accepted the job offer, and I was ecstatic. When I told them about the hour-long commute, my dad had immediately said, "Well, you'll take the sedan, of course. It's the most reliable." It was a promise, a logical, sensible plan. But then Leo had chimed in. He'd just gotten a job shelving books at the university library, a position he described with the gravity of a Supreme Court appointment. "But Dad, I need a good car too," he'd whined, leaning back in his chair with a practiced pout. "I can't be late. My boss is counting on me, and I have study groups." My mother, Susan, had immediately jumped to his defense. "He's right, Mark. Leo's studies are so demanding. He needs to be able to get around without worrying about the bus schedule." I had stared at them, dumbfounded. "I have a career," I said, my voice tight. "A real, full-time job that I could lose if I'm not punctual. Leo's job is 10 minutes away, on a campus with its own shuttle system." My father wouldn't meet my eyes. He studied a spot on the tablecloth as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Clara, don't make this difficult," he'd mumbled. "You're older. You know how to handle car trouble if it happens. Your brother, he'd be lost." Leo had smirked then, a quick, triumphant little smile that he tried to hide behind his hand. He was the antagonist in my story, but he was a villain of my parents' own making. He had been so coddled, so insulated from consequence, that he genuinely believed his convenience was more important than my livelihood. His polished, easy charm was a weapon, and he wielded it with expert precision against our parents. He had no real profession to speak of, just a vague sense of academic importance, yet his needs were always presented as urgent and non-negotiable. When they presented me with the keys to Old Betsy, it was with an air of forced cheerfulness, as if they were doing me a favor. "Think of it as an adventure," my mother had chirped. Leo had simply shrugged, already texting his friends to brag about his new ride. He hadn't even said thank you. The 2 weeks leading up to the breakdown had been a nightmare. The car smelled like mildew and gasoline. The radio was broken, so my hour-long commute was spent in silence, listening to every new creak and groan fro. The engine. Twice, it had refused to start in the morning, making me late for work and earning me a stern warning from my boss. Each time, I'd had to call my father, who would sigh and instruct me on how to jiggle the battery cables, always with the underlying tone that this was somehow my fault for not understanding the car's quirks. My sacrifices for the family had been constant and quiet. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who organized holiday gatherings, who drove my mother to doctor's appointments when she sprained her ankle. I had poured my time and energy into the family unit, believing that my contributions were seen and valued. But the car swap proved they were. My reliability wasn't a virtue to be rewarded, it was a resource to be exploited. They saw me as a shock absorber for the family's problems, someone who could take the hits so that Leo wouldn't have to. Now, holding the proof of ownership in my hand, I saw the full picture with devastating clarity. The antagonist wasn't just Leo with his entitled smirk. It was my parents, with their placating smiles and willful blindness. They were the ones who had cultivated this environment of inequality. They had shown me, in no uncertain terms, that my security and my future were expendable. Their love, it seemed, was conditional, and the primary condition was that I never, ever stand in the way of my brother's comfort. The morning after the breakdown, I woke up with a steely resolve that felt foreign and exhilarating. The fear and panic from the highway had crystallized into something hard and clear. A plan. The passive, accommodating daughter was gone. In her place was a woman with a legal document and a growing sense of righteous fury. My first step was to shift from victim to strategist. I called in sick to work, a decision that churned my stomach with guilt but was entirely necessary. I couldn't risk another breakdown, and more importantly, I needed the day to put my plan into motion. My first call was not to a mechanic, but to the number on a "We Buy Used Cars" flyer that had been stuck to our mailbox for weeks. A man with a gravelly voice answered, "Cash for cars, what's your vehicle?" I described Old Betsy in painstaking detail, listing her age, her litany of known issues, and the current state of her very dead engine. I was honest, not wanting any surprises. "It doesn't run," I concluded. "You'd have to tow it." There was a moment of silence, and I could hear him tapping on a keyboard. 15 years old, water pumps shot, you say? Best I can do is $500. We'll pick it up today. $500. It was a pittance, but it was also $500 more than I had yesterday. More importantly, it was a concrete offer, a way out. "What do I need to have with me?" I asked. "Title and a driver's license. As long as the title's clean and in your name, we give you cash on the spot." "It is," I said, a surge of triumph coursing through me. "It's in my name." The trap was set. The key piece of leverage wasn't just the title itself, but my family's complete ignorance of it. They believed the car was theirs to control, a broken tool they could force upon me. They had no idea I held the power to simply make it disappear. My investigation continued online. I spent the next hour researching certified pre-owned vehicles from reputable dealerships in the area. I built a spreadsheet, comparing models, mileage, and financing options. I wasn't just daydreaming, I was creating a tangible future, one where my mobility and safety weren't dependent on my parents' whims. I found a 3-year-old Honda Civic with low mileage and a perfect safety rating. The down payment required was $2,000. The $500 from Old Betsy wouldn't cover it, but it was a start. The rest I could pull from my emergency savings, the fund I had painstakingly built since I started working. It would drain my account, but it was a necessary investment in my own independence. Around noon, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. "Clara, honey, are you feeling all right? You've been cooped up in there all morning." I opened the door, schooling my features into a neutral expression. "I'm fine, just resting. My stomach is a little upset." She peered past me into the room, her eyes scanning for any sign of my activities. "Your father called the mechanic. He can't look at the car until Friday." "Okay," I said simply. Her brow furrowed. She was expecting more. A complaint, a sigh, a question about how I was supposed to get to work for the rest of the week. My calm compliance seemed to unnerve her. "Well," she said, flustered, "I suppose you can take our car for the next few days. I'll have Leo drop me off at the grocery store." The offer was a transparent attempt to smooth things over, to re-establish the old order where they held all the cards. A week ago, I would have accepted gratefully. Today, I saw it for the manipulation it was. "That's okay, Mom," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm figuring out my own solution." This was clearly not the answer she wanted. "What do you mean, your own solution? Don't be silly. The car will be fixed." I decided to test the waters, to gently nudge the corner of the trap I had laid. "Honestly, I don't think that car is worth fixing. I was thinking I might just sell it." My mother laughed. It was a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "Sell it? Clara, you can't sell your father's car. Don't be ridiculous." "That's the funny thing," I said, my voice even and steady. "I was looking through the paperwork yesterday for the insurance, and I found the title. He signed it over to me last year, so technically, it's my car to sell." The smile vanished from her face. Her expression went from confusion to alarm in a matter of seconds. She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, as the implication of my words slowly dawned on her. What are you talking about? He would have told me. You must have misread it." "I don't think so," I replied, keeping my tone light. "It seemed pretty straightforward, his signature and everything." She didn't have a response. She just stood there, blinking, as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. I had planted the seed. The comfortable narrative she lived in, the one where she and my father made all the decisions, had just been challenged. Her reaction was everything I needed to see. The shock, the denial, the flicker of panic in her eyes, it confirmed they had no idea. I have to make a call," she stammered, turning and hurrying back down the stairs. I closed my bedroom door, a slow smile spreading across my face. The investigation was complete. The trap was primed. All I had to do now was wait for them to walk into it. It didn't take long for the first tremors of panic to shake the household. Less than 10 minutes after my conversation with my mother, I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of my father's urgent footsteps. He worked from home, and I had clearly interrupted his day. He didn't bother knocking on my door, he just pushed it open. My mother stood behind him in the hallway, wringing her hands. My father, Mark, was not a man who handled surprises well. His face was flushed, and his eyes were narrowed. "Clara, what is this nonsense your mother is telling me about you selling the car?" I was sitting on my bed, my laptop open to a car loan calculator. I looked up at him calmly. "It's not nonsense. I'm planning on selling it." "You are planning no such thing," he boomed, his voice echoing in the small room. He was trying to use his parental authority, the deep, commanding tone that had always made me and Leo snap to attention as children, but it had lost its power over me. "That car is family property. You will do nothing of the sort." This was the moment, the first major confrontation. I had planned for it, rehearsed my lines in my head. I kept my voice perfectly level, refusing to be drawn into an emotional shouting match. "Family property?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's interesting, because according to this, it's my property." I reached over to my nightstand, picked up the folded title, and held it out to him. "You should recognize it. That's your signature right there, isn't it?" He snatched the document from my hand and unfolded it, his eyes scanning the page frantically. My mother crowded behind him, peering over his shoulder. I watched his face as he processed the information. The blustering anger slowly deflated, replaced by a look of utter confusion, and then a dawning horror. He remembered. I could see the exact moment the memory clicked into place. A dry, forgotten piece of paperwork from a year ago, a small change made to save a few dollars on the family insurance plan, now rearing its head to ruin his day. This was just for the insurance, he stammered, his voice losing its confident edge. It doesn't mean anything. It's still my car. I paid for it. The law would disagree, I said simply. A signed title is a legally binding document. You transferred ownership to me. The car is mine. My mother finally found her voice, though it was shrill with panic. Clara, this is insane. Why are you doing this? After all we do for you, we are trying to help you by getting the car fixed. Help me? I let out a short, humorless laugh. You helped me by giving my reliable car to Leo and forcing me into a death trap that left me stranded on a highway and almost cost me my job. That's your idea of help. Your brother needed that car, she insisted, her voice rising. Her immediate reaction was to defend Leo, to protect the established order. It was so predictable it was almost sad. You are being selfish and ungrateful. The accusation hung in the air. For years, those words had been my kryptonite, capable of making me fold, apologize, and accept whatever scraps they threw my way. Not anymore. No, I said, standing up to face them. I am not being ungrateful. I am being practical. I am taking a dangerous, unreliable vehicle out of my life and solving my own problem, since you two clearly won't. My father, having failed to intimidate me, switched tactics to poorly executed threats. If you sell that car, don't expect a penny from me for a new one, he warned, pointing a finger at me. You'll be on your own. That was always the plan, I replied coolly. I've been on my own for a while now, you just haven't noticed. His face crumpled slightly. My words had hit their mark. The confrontation had shattered their perception of control. Their threats were empty because they were based on a power dynamic that no longer existed. They couldn't take away a car that wasn't theirs. They couldn't threaten to withhold financial help I had never expected to receive. I had all the power, and they were finally starting to realize it. We will discuss this later, my father said, his voice low and tight with fury. He threw the title onto my bed. This is not over, Clara. He turned and stormed out of the room, my mother trailing helplessly behind him. The first battle was won. I had revealed my key piece of information, and their reaction, a clumsy mix of blustering, lies, and empty threats, had only confirmed how right I was. They weren't angry because I was being irrational. They were angry because I was breaking the rules. I was refusing to play the part of the compliant daughter, and it was throwing their entire world into chaos. I picked up the title, folded it carefully, and placed it back on the nightstand. The war was just beginning. The atmosphere in the house became thick with a hostile silence. My parents avoided me, speaking only in clipped, one-word sentences when direct interaction was unavoidable. They were trying to punish me with their disapproval, a tactic that had worked for 24 years. But now, their silence felt less like a punishment and more like a relief. It gave me the space I needed to finalize my plan. Their desperation, however, began to show in other ways. They enlisted their greatest weapon, Leo. He appeared at my bedroom door that evening, leaning against the frame with a look of practiced concern on his face. It was a performance, and a bad one at that. Hey, Clara, he began, his tone casual. Mom and Dad told me what's going on. You're really going to sell old Betsy. That's the plan, I said, not looking up from my book. But why? He asked, feigning confusion. Dad's going to get it fixed, and what about me? Sometimes I need to borrow a car on the weekends if Mom needs hers. The sheer audacity of his statement almost made me laugh. He already had the best car in the family, and now he was preemptively complaining about losing access to the broken-down spare he hadn't touched in years. He was staking a claim on a car he didn't need, simply because he couldn't stand the thought of me having something that was solely mine. "That sounds like a you problem, Leo," I said, finally meeting his gaze. "You have the sedan, the reliable one, remember." His charming facade cracked. A flash of resentment crossed his face. "You're just being difficult," he snapped. "You're just mad because I got the better car. You should just get over it. It's not a big deal." "It wasn't a big deal to you because you weren't the one stranded on the I-405, I shot back, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You weren't the one who almost lost their job, so don't you dare tell me it's not a big deal." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. He wasn't used to being challenged. "Whatever," he muttered, pushing himself off the doorframe. "You're just being selfish." He stormed off, his parting shot a weak echo of my mother's. Their attempts to regain control were clumsy and desperate. The case I was building wasn't about digging up dirt. It was about standing firm in the face of their emotional manipulation. My evidence was the signed title and my own unwavering resolve. The next day, I finalized the sale. I called the Cash for Cars company back and scheduled the pickup for Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I chose the time and day with strategic precision. Sunday afternoon was when my aunt and uncle often dropped by for coffee. It was the most public time of the week in our quiet suburban home. The final, most powerful confrontation came on Saturday night. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when my father walked in. He looked tired, the fight seemingly drained out of him. He leaned against the counter and sighed. "Clara, we need to end this," he said, his voice heavy. "This is tearing the family apart." "I agree," I said. "It should have ended the day you took my car away." He winced. "I know you're upset, and maybe your mother and I made a mistake, but selling the car is not the answer. It's an overreaction." He was trying a new tactic, feigned reason and a half-hearted admission of guilt. It was too little, too late. "What do you suggest I do, Dad?" I asked, turning to face him fully. "Should I keep driving it? Should I wait for it to break down on the highway again, maybe next time with more serious consequences? Should I lose my job because I can't get there reliably? What is the correct, non-overreaction in your opinion?" He had no answer. He just stared at me, his jaw tight. "I have the title, Dad," I said, my voice softening slightly. I wasn't trying to be cruel, I was trying to be clear. "It's my car. I'm selling it tomorrow. A tow truck is coming at 2 p.m. to pick it up." I thought he might explode, but instead, he just looked defeated. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" "I have," I said. "I had a lot of time to think on the side of the road." He tried one last time, a final attempt to appeal to my sense of duty. "What will people think, Clara? What will the neighbors think when a tow truck comes to haul away our car?" That was it. That was what he was truly afraid of. Not my safety, not my career, but the appearance of dysfunction. The shame. "They'll think we're getting rid of a broken-down car," I said, "and they'll be right." He seemed to shrink before my eyes. The spell of his parental authority was completely broken. He had no more threats, no more arguments, no more leverage. The irrefutable proof of the signed title had disarmed him entirely. He slowly shook his head and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my sandwich and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The final showdown was set for the following day, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was ready. Sunday afternoon arrived with a tense, expectant quiet. My parents and Leo moved around the house like ghosts, avoiding eye contact and speaking in whispers. They knew what was coming. I spent the morning in my room, confirming my appointment at the Honda dealership for the following day. At 1:45 p.m., as if on cue, my Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim's car pulled into the driveway. They were my father's sister and her husband, kind but blissfully unaware of our family's internal politics. My mother greeted them at the door with a smile so fake it looked painful. "Carol, Jim, what a nice surprise." As they settled in the living room with coffee, I came downstairs. I greeted them warmly before heading to the front window, peering out at the street. My heart was pounding, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. This was it. At precisely 2:00 p.m., the large flatbed tow truck from Cash for Cars rumbled down our quiet suburban street and pulled up in front of our house, its yellow emergency lights flashing slowly. The effect was immediate and dramatic. "Good heavens, Mark, what's going on?" Aunt Carol asked, her eyes wide as she looked out the window. My father's face was a mask of grim resignation. "It's nothing, Carol, just a small issue with one of the cars." Right on schedule, the tow truck driver, a burly man in a grease-stained jumpsuit, got out and strode up the driveway, a clipboard in his hand. "Here for a gray sedan? Name's Clara." "That's me," I said, opening the front door and stepping outside. The scene on the driveway was pure, unadulterated chaos. My father, mother, and Leo all rushed out behind me, their faces a mixture of fury and panic. "Clara, don't do this," my mother hissed, grabbing my arm. "Think of the neighbors. Think of your aunt and uncle." "I am thinking of them," I said, pulling my arm away gently. "I'm sure they'll be relieved to know I won't be driving this unsafe car anymore." My father stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the driver. "I forbid this. You will call this off right now." The driver looked from my father to me, his expression wary. "Is there a problem here?" This was my moment. The public showdown I had engineered. With my aunt and uncle watching from the living room window and a neutral stranger as my witness, I laid everything bare. "There's no problem," I said, my voice calm and clear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is my car. My father signed the title over to me a year ago. A few weeks ago, my parents decided to give the family's safe, reliable car to my brother, and they insisted I drive this one to my new job, an hour away." I gestured to old Betsy, which sat looking sad and broken on the driveway. On Thursday, it broke down in the middle of the I-405 during rush hour. I was stranded for over an hour. I almost lost my job. I've decided to sell my car since it's not safe to drive. I presented the facts without emotion, a simple, devastating summary of their negligence. Aunt Carol's jaw had dropped. Uncle Jim looked at my father with an expression of profound disappointment. Leo, seeing his world of comfort and privilege threatened, finally snapped. The charming, easygoing facade crumbled completely, revealing the entitled brat underneath. "You're ruining everything," he eked, his voice cracking like a petulant child's. "It's just a stupid car. I needed the good one. My life is important too, you know." His meltdown was the final nail in the coffin. In that moment of pure, unfiltered selfishness, my parents saw him for what he was. They saw the monster of entitlement they had so carefully created. My mother looked at him, her eyes filled not with her usual adoration, but with a dawning horror. My father simply closed his eyes, a flicker of deep shame crossing his face. The tow truck driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, as long as you have the title in your name, it's your call." I turned to him and smiled. "I do." I handed him the title and my license. He glanced them over, checked the VIN on the car, and nodded. "All right then." He handed me back my license and a small envelope of cash. "Let's get this loaded up." I stepped aside and watched as he skillfully winched old Betsy onto the flatbed. My family stood frozen, defeated. The public humiliation was complete. As the truck secured the car and drove away, taking with it years of resentment and injustice, I felt a profound sense of release. The final, triumphant action wasn't a shouted word or a dramatic gesture. It was the quiet, methodical removal of the problem. I had broken free not by fighting on their terms, but by creating my own. The spell was broken, and our family, for better or worse, would never be the same. The immediate aftermath of the tow truck's departure was deafeningly silent. My aunt and uncle, looking deeply uncomfortable, made their excuses and left within minutes. My parents and Leo retreated into the house without a word, scattering to different rooms like shrapnel from an explosion. I was left standing alone on the driveway, the envelope of cash feeling heavy and significant in my hand. It wasn't much money, but it was the price of my freedom. The next day, I used that cash along with my savings to put a down payment on the certified pre-owned Honda Civic I had researched. The process was simple, professional, and entirely my own. When I drove it home, the feeling was indescribable. It was more than just a car. It was a symbol of my independence, a testament to my ability to solve my own problems. I had taken a situation meant to control and diminish me and had turned it into a source of empowerment. That evening, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. It was my mother. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked smaller than I had ever seen her. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I nodded, and she sat on the edge of my bed. For a long moment, she just sat there, twisting the hem of her shirt in her hands. "I am so sorry, Clara," she finally whispered, the words sounding rusty, as if she hadn't used them in a long time. "We were wrong. I was wrong." Tears welled in her eyes. "When I saw Leo's face yesterday, that tantrum he threw, I saw what we've been doing. We've spent so much time making his life easy that we forgot to teach him how to be a good person. And we took you for granted. We always relied on you to be the strong one, and we never stopped to think about how unfair that was." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. It was the apology I had been waiting for my entire life. My own anger began to melt away, replaced by a weary sort of sadness for all the years we had lost to this broken dynamic. My father apologized the next day. His was less emotional, more practical, but just as sincere. "I failed you, Clara," he said, his voice thick with regret. "My job is to protect my children, and I put you in danger. There's no excuse for it." The healing process was slow and awkward, but it was real. We started talking, truly talking, for the first time in years. They had to confront the uncomfortable truth of their favoritism, and I had to learn to trust them again. The biggest change was in how they handled Leo. They sat him down and had a long, difficult conversation. The sedan was no longer his. It was now the official family car, and he had to ask permission to use it. He was required to get a bus pass for his daily commute to campus. The consequences were minor in the grand scheme of things, but for someone who had never faced any, they were seismic. He was sullen and resentful for weeks, but slowly, without the constant safety net my parents had provided, he began to change. He started to grow up. Justice, for me, wasn't about punishing my family. It was about reestablishing balance. It was about forcing them to see me as an individual with needs and limits, not just as a reliable cog in the family machine. I drove my new car to work every day with a sense of peace and security I had never known. I was excelling at my job, and my boss, impressed by my resilience, had given me the lead on a new, even bigger project. My life was finally my own. The antagonist had never been just one person, but a system of behavior that had been allowed to fester for years. By selling that car, I hadn't just gotten rid of a piece of metal. I had dismantled the system. The resolution wasn't a fiery explosion, but a quiet recalibration of our entire family, leading us toward a new, more honest, and far more respectful future.